good afternoon or good evening, or maybe even good morning. It depends where you are. On behalf of the K family, a warm welcome to the Hillside Vertical Shiraz tasting at K Brothers. My name is Michael WEHRS and I'm heading up sales and marketing since a good decade, so to speak. Everyone knows my first name by now. Yes, we are very excited to host another virtual tasting. Today's program is basically looking at 6 vintages of Hillside Shiraz. We are located in the beautiful heritage-listed cask room. Yes, behind us you see some beautiful barrels. They're all full. Yeah, if we ran out of wine, we could even have a sip out of the barrels. Anyway, it's beautiful spring weather. It's just rained a bit. We had a little bit of sunshine in the afternoon. Yes, I love particularly the spring in McLaren Vale. When we look sort of over to the Mount Lofty ranges, it's just all green and lush, and it just sort of brings me back to, well, my German upbringing. I'm from Munich originally, so southern German, Bavarian. Yeah, so it's my preferred season of the year. And certainly we've had a fair bit of rain in order to provide more lusciousness. Alongside of me, I've got Katie Spain, Wine Communicator 2021, wine journalist for Gourmet Traveller magazine, a very colourful person indeed, as we can see even how she is dressed. And then I've got Duncan Kennedy. He's our, chief winemaker. He's our viticulturist, so he wears 2 hats at the same time. And that's what we have to do at small boutique winery, artisanal winery. We wear many hats, but not as colourful as Katie's. Anyway, I think I'll just hand over to Katie because she will mainly ask the questions during the tasting, and then we will all contribute. So hope you're all relaxed and laid back. Just enjoy the wines. We don't want to be like a school class. No, it's relaxed. You're tasting some beautiful wines, and it's a very unique tasting because you don't very often have the chance to look at 6 wines from the same wine in different vintages. And so it'll be quite interesting, I hope, for everyone to actually see what is the point of difference. Anyway, I hand over to Katie.
Thank you, Michael, and hello, Duncan. And hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us all. I really don't need much of an excuse to hang out with you two for an evening, especially when there are 6 beautiful wines in front of us. I too love this season. I grew up on a dairy farm, and the green is always a good sign. The hay fever I could do without. I'm not sure about how you're all doing interstate, but it's pretty shocking here at the moment. If you have questions as we roll through this nice casual tasting and discussion, please do ask them, and to do that, just type in your questions below the YouTube video that you're watching, and hopefully we'll get to them. If there's any we miss, the guys will answer them for you after the tasting. So before we delve into the vertical, Duncan, can you tell us a little bit about the happenings in the vineyard and also the winery throughout winter and early spring this year?
Yeah, okay. Just a bit of water to clear my throat. Welcome, everyone. We've, like most of people around Australia, it's been a little bit wet. But that's a good thing for us at this time because all that rainfall is just preparing the vines for the dry summer, which we can often get quite warm, dry summers in McLaren Vale. So we welcome the rain at the moment. The vines haven't grown too much, so we're not distressed about disease pressure or anything like that just yet. And we've finished pruning, and the vines are growing quite nicely. And yeah, it looks like it might be a good year.
Fingers crossed. Now, before the focus today is on the Hillside Shiraz. We have 6 to make our way through. Before we do that, can you tell us a bit of the background story behind the Hillside Shiraz?
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk about the vineyard here is referred to as Amery, so the Amery vineyard, and the eastern hillside, which is out this way, is what the wine's essentially named after. So the grapes that grow along that terraced hillside, they face to the east. So the hot summer sun goes sort of north and north to the west, so we get a bit of a cooling aspect there. So that always allows a bit of elegance to the character of the hillside. But basically what we're doing is we're taking our best parcels of fruit apart from the famous Block 6. So Block 6, planted in 1892, which I'm sure you guys are all well aware of, that's its own single vineyard wine, and that's our icon wine, that's our top shelf wine. But after that, we're selecting the best parcels of Shiraz and we're putting them together as the hillside. There's a couple of little interesting facts. In 1992, which was 100 years after Block 6 was planted, Colin took cuttings, or Colin's team, Colin Kay, took cuttings from Block 6. I believe they took 2 cuttings from each vine and planted them to the north of where the original Block 6 was. So there's like the little baby Block 6, which they called New Block 6. So that was planted 100 years later, and it's basically a bit of a replicate. The soil's a little bit different, but it's similar traverse up along the hill, just a bit, probably about 300 or 400 metres to the north. And that's the sort of the backbone behind the hillside. And then we'll take some parcels from a few other blocks, Block 11 or Block 8, depending on the vintage and how things are looking.
Excellent. Right, I don't know about all of you at home, but I'm thirsty and I can smell some beautiful aromas coming at me. So we are moving from left to right from the 2019, and then we'll move backwards through the years. It depends how you've poured yours at home, but just so you know, we'll start with wine number 1, the 2019 Hillside Shiraz. So Duncan, can you tell us a bit more about the specifics of the 2019 vintage and the winemaking process for the Hillside?
Sure. Before I do that, I'll just mention that what we're tasting here is from the bottles, the real bottles, and what everybody's tasting at home in your pack started out in one of these bottles, and then they've basically decanted it and poured them into the little portions for you. So what we're looking at today is the same wine, but I feel that in the packs, the wines perhaps might look a bit more advanced or a bit more developed than what we're looking at here. So just sort of bear that in mind. And the 2019, which winemakers don't, and wine critics perhaps as well, don't go on about that much really. I loved 2019. It wasn't a very good year for yields. There wasn't a lot of crop. We had quite windy conditions at flowering, so the crops were small. But the summer started out dry, but the final ripening period was quite cool and dry. So you've got robust wines and good concentration because of the small crop and the small berries. But I think there's sort of some herbaceous edges, sort of a cool climate or a cooler vintage character, which personally I quite like. So yeah, I like the complexity and sort of like those dried herbal notes, but you've still got some nice fruit and really good acidity and good natural acidity from 2019.
Well, if I sort of swirl it in the glass, it's actually beautifully aromatic, that Hillside 2019 really sort of jumps out of the glass. And of course, I had a bit of time to look at the other wines beforehand. So a very aromatic wine, but then it's sort of quite really McLaren full throttle, as good as it gets. And yeah, it's a wine from a lower vintage, as Duncan described it, possibly about 25% less. So when we look at sort of the production numbers, they are certainly lower and down. And it's quite interesting to sort of see where wine journalists put it and sort of located it. Gary Walsh recently wrote a beautiful article about the 2019, and he called it, well, it's rugged and so of a place. It's a rugged beauty, actually, he said, and so of a place. And that's what I think the Hillside is about. I think it's early days. When we look at the 2019, it's in, you know, it's in the first steps, baby steps. I think it'll go for a long time. It can sort of progress. And Erin Larkin from Wine Advocate recently gave it until 2039, which is quite a long life. So there's certainly some life in the Hillside. I don't know whether I wait until 2039.
I don't know if I'll live until 2039, to be honest, but we were trying to do the maths on that earlier. Maths is not my strong point, but I think it certainly gives a bit of a talking point around the longevity of Hillside Shiraz. I would say maybe, you know, get 6, put them away, have one now, have one in a year, and see how they go. But Duncan, where do you stand on the longevity side of things?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing when you look at the wines across from the different vintages, and there's always going to be a little bit of vintage variation, and we'll discuss that as we go. But there's also a bit of a consistency of style to the Hillside. Like they're all got this sort of dark fruit and a little bit of toasty oak in there, which as you get through to the older wines, that sort of dissipated a little bit, and then as they age and you get into the, you know, the 14s and the 15s and even the 16 a little bit, there's a bit more of those secondary characters. So there's sort of that soy saucy thing, and the tannins soften. So the tannins in the Hillside are I find them fairly soft and velvety anyway, but as they get older, they're a lot softer and more gentle, and there's perhaps a bit more earthiness and elegance to them. But yeah, it's a nice way to compare them and see. Some people will prefer the younger wines, and others will like the ones with a bit more age.
And do tell us as we roll through. We'd love to hear what you're thinking. Now, wine number 2, the 2018 Hillside Shiraz. So this wine was bottled on the 12th of March, 2020. Is anyone else feeling a bit of PTSD from that date?
Yes.
That date does ring a bell with another big worldwide event. We all kind of, well, we should all know what that is. If you missed it, you've been in the right place. Duncan, it must have been really challenging to organise the bottling amid the start of what was and is a worldwide health crisis.
Yeah, it was. But to be honest, the bottling was probably the least of my concerns because it was during the vintage. So the vintage 2020, and we're doing quite a lot of hand picking. Most of the fruit here in the Hillside is hand harvested. So trying to secure hand harvesting crews, and there was people that were wanting to skip and go to Victoria, hand harvesters, hand pickers, because they worried they were going to get stuck in South Australia, and they wanted to get there for the apple picking season in Victoria. So, but we got through it, and we, you know, some of the states, like obviously Victoria, got fully locked down, and we were pretty lucky really in South Australia.
Have you recovered from all that, Michael?
How
are you feeling?
But I haven't been home to Germany for the 4 years, so I'm looking forward to coming or going back rather to visit some of my family, and it'll be next year in 2023. Yeah, I love that 2018 Hillside. I think that's an absolute cracker. It's a really beautiful, rich, intense style. Nothing is out of place. It's actually quite drinking beautiful for me. And yeah, it's a wine we are tremendously proud of. The 18 vintage was that sort of more classic vintage. Joe Chavinsky from Wine Advocate described it appropriately. And he said, I think if I had to pick one Shiraz to epitomize McLaren Vale, the 2018 Hillside Shiraz would be a strong contender. And I think that's what it is. It's a really good year. We had, I think, sort of February and March, when I remember, were sort of temperature-wise a bit sort of milder. but there were sort of a smaller heat involvement before then, so that's normal for McLaren Vale. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful, rich style, sort of blackberry intensity, sort of chocolate characters coming through. I really love this wine. Yeah, it's got a lovely style. And yeah, I'll hand over to you and say, what character would you give it if you looked at a character?
What character? Well, this is actually a good way to word things for me, because rather than getting too technical and too pointy, I often think of wines with character in terms of personality and a little bit like a person. And for me, the Hillside, I was thinking about this earlier, is sexy. It's that dark, handsome, silent stranger in the corner of the room, quite kind of strong, masculine. I obviously fancy them because I want them to put those big, strong arms around me. But simultaneously, there's that kind of alluring, kind of softer character about it. When I think of characters, it's kind of like a few wine writers I know. I think, you know, that big kind of physical structure, but as you get to know it a bit more, and as we'll see as we work back through the years, there's that kind of almost cuddly, comforting teddy bear element to it. So that's where I should probably write a Mills and Boon about wine, or 50 Shades of Grey. But that for me is the character of this wine, kind of strong, silent, but a really alluring undercurrent about it.
Beautifully said. I love that description.
Now, Duncan, what makes the winemaking traditional at K's?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. There's probably a lot of elements to it, and obviously the K family's been growing grapes here for a long, long time. But we've also got the heritage listed winery, and we're still using the open fermenters that were built in the 1890s. So open fermenters, we're plunging them twice a day during fermentation, utilising a lot of hand harvesting, as we talked about before. And once they finish fermenting, we press them. And that's probably one of the cornerstones to our traditional winemaking, and it reflects our house style. And we've got this beautiful old basket press from 1928, and it's not the most efficient press going around, but it's soft and gentle. And because we've got fairly, you talked about the masculinity, the tannins and the structure of the Hillside, all the K's wines really are quite intense to start with. So that soft extraction with the basket press just gives you fine tannins and gives you nice gentleness, so the wines are not too big and overpowering. And then of course, we're aging the wine underneath where we sit, right? So there's 3 levels to the winery, and we've sort of got the top. This is the cask room, but underneath us is the bottom cellar. So all the reserve wines, like Block 6 and the Hillside and the Cuthbert Cabernet, are cellared beneath us. So it's very cool down there, and big thick stone walls that came from local rock. So this is all part of the traditional character, and it all plays a part in the winemaking at K Brothers.
Excellent. Oh, we're getting some comments and questions coming in. I love this modern world we live in. So Kerry Kitson says, hi from Perth. Hi, Kerry. And Kerry says, we wrote down tannins, blackberry and spice from the 2019. And
Hi from Perth.
Hi from Perth.
Long way. That's in the afternoon, early afternoon sit there.
It's the perfect time for a Shiraz, I would say. And that's Marty. I'm not sure where you are, Marty, but Marty says the 2018 is magic, but I'm trying to work out if the 2019 could overtake it in 20 years. Thoughts?
That's a great question. I think you've got actually some pretty good structure in the 2019, and when I say the structure, it's that tannin and acid and that longevity. It also, to me, looks tight and bound up now, and I think it's going to open up and develop. The 18's got a bit of everything, and that was a classic Shiraz year, and it's got such dark, dense fruit, and maybe the fruit's overpowering the tannin and the acid a little bit now. So I think the 18 will be a wine that ages well, but yeah, I would say that the 2019 will probably hold its colour and it's just its whole togetherness. I think it'll age probably longer than the 2018. That's a really good question.
Good question. Keep them coming, guys. Let's slide nicely into wine number 3, the 2017 Hillside Shiraz. So I noticed that the production in this vintage is well above average. Duncan, what's the reason behind that?
Well, a bit like 2022, so the year of 2016, before the vintage of 2017, it rained a lot. So we had above average rainfall, and because of the slope of the hillside, a lot of that water runs off through the spring and into the early summer. So we find that the years with extra rainfall are often like really good years for us, because we just get a bit of a moderating effect, and sometimes if it's a very dry, warm year, the wines can be a bit leaner and don't have quite as much flesh. So yeah, that's why, just because the yields are high, it doesn't mean the quality's not good. So 17 was one of those years where it all came together. 2021 was another year of a similar thing, where you had above average rainfall and a very high quality, and that's what I think of the 17 like. All of the wines from 17 have beautiful floral notes. They're quite lifted and elegant. They've still got intense fruit, not quite as intense as some of the others. It's probably more about the aromatics in the 17 wine, and then lovely, gentle, natural acidity. And yeah, it's one of my favourites, the 17.
Well, I concur. I have to say, within the last decade or so, the 2017 is certainly one of my absolute favorite Hillside Shirazes. And it's sort of, contra to popular belief, in years where you've got higher yields, many people say, oh yeah, you need the vines to be stressed a little bit, and you need lower yields. I actually find in years where you've got good rainfall, you've got a different sort of juice to skin ratio. In the scheme of things, there is more sort of juiciness, and there's very fine tannins, really silky tannins, and that's what I see in the 2017. For me, that's beautifully approachable now, and yeah, I have to say that's a cracker for me. The 2017 looks really fantastic, and yeah, I say, yeah, you don't have to have a low-yielding vintage. You definitely can do with good rainfall, plush grapes, and then you get the juiciness, and that's what I enjoy in the 2017 Hillside Shiraz. It's beautiful, sort of approachable. Yes, you can store it and mature it for a while, but it will certainly, you certainly have fun drinking it already now.
Might have to steal the rest of the bottle and take that one home, I think. Wine number 4, the 2016 Hillside Shiraz. So looking at the text sheet in front of me, the grapes were picked much earlier, about 3 weeks, in comparison to the previous 3 vintages. And I guess this tells a story, Duncan. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, and I think that's the great thing about wine and the vintage, and we talk about vintage a lot, and it's the season, it's what differs every season. 2016 was a very warm, dry start to the summer, but then after Christmas time, again, a bit like 2019, the final ripening conditions were quite mild, but we really didn't get a lot of rainfall. So again, we had very small yields, but we had healthy vines, so the crop was able to ripen fairly quickly, and that was why it was harvested a bit earlier. And in the end, we had good flavour ripeness, so the alcohol level was actually a bit lower than it often is in the 2016. And just something I've just noticed is this probably, with this part of the tasting, sort of the 16s and the 15 and the 14 is where you start to see a bit of that development, and you see how the wine's starting to age, and whereas the first 3 wines are a bit more vibrant and fresher, as the wines age, they do lose a bit of freshness, but then they gain all this complexity and earthiness, and whether it's sort of a forest floor or a sort of a mushroomy sort of character and things like that.
Where are you at with this one, Michael?
Well, I mean, it's now 6 years old, so certainly has been in bottle about 4 years. So it had some time, or was afforded some time to mature. And I think it's quite seamless. So basically, it's very balanced, very round. And yeah, that's what I look in a wine. I want the balance, I want the roundness, I don't want to have anything sticking out. And I think the 2016 is a good example of that. Nothing is out of place. It's really just indulgent. I think, yes, you can put it down for a while, but this is getting to more sort of really immediate drinking style, and you definitely don't need to sell it for much longer. I really like that sort of style a lot.
I think it's sitting in a really lovely space, and it's quite pretty, I think. Kerry has told us what I shouldn't assume Kerry's a she. Kerry has told us what they think of the 2017. It has a very rosy nose to me, and Mark says good fruit and a good acid lift. Yeah, good comments, I think.
Spot on.
You can take my job, Kerry, if I get hit by a bus. Good descriptors. Now, moving on to wine number 5. So, the 2015 Hillside Shiraz. I hope you've all got cheese platters going on in the background here too. Duncan, this was your first full vintage at the helm of winemaker and viticulturist. How did you deal with the, what I can only imagine was high expectations of the Kay family to make great wines?
Oh, well, I'm sure there are high expectations, but, you know, the Kay family, most of the stories that I have are really from Cuthbert and Colin. So unfortunately I never met Cuthbert, but Colin and the rest of the Kay family are very humble people. So, you know, I've never felt that they put any kind of extraordinary pressure on me, but of course, as I'm not part of the Kay family, I guess in the background there probably is, you know, a bit of scepticism, not in a negative way, but that's just a normal feeling, I guess. But yeah, it's an honour to work at Kay Brothers and all the tradition and the history and the beautiful vineyard. So yeah, I don't see it as pressure. I see it as just a wonderful opportunity.
Do you remember, and I'm throwing this one in here, do you remember the first Kay Brothers wine you ever tasted?
Well, yeah, I do. I visited the cellar door. I'll try not to waffle on too long. I think it was about 2005, and the wine, like I would have tasted most of the range, but the one that I did remember was, I think it was the 2003, but it was definitely a Hillside, and it always sticks in my mind, the Hillside. And then I moved to McLaren Vale about 4 years after that time, and often if I had people visit from other areas, we would visit Kays because I was fond of the place and I thought it showed, you know, rustic character and beautiful wines and a beautiful view. And when I look at the wines now, whether it's from a barrel or it's when we're getting closer to bottling and we're looking at the blend, or we take a sample home and look at it over dinner, I look at the wine and go, yep, looks like a Hillside. So I do have a bit of a connection, and it's probably the Hillside's the wine that I remember from before I worked here. Yeah. So.
Special story. Greg says they all have a beautiful iron mineral note, which also I think is spot on. And Kerry asks how long to age the 2017 in particular.
Well, again, that's a really good question, and everybody's going to have their preference on how they like to drink it. And I would say over the next 5 years. So obviously now it looks good. Try and drink it now within the next 5 years. I don't think there's any point, because if you leave it too long, you will lose some of those floral notes that we talked about. That Kerry, I think, mentioned the floral, like the rose petals and stuff like that. So, yeah.
It's sort of, when we look at the drinking window, sort of, Duncan, where would you sort of see it? It's sort of more somewhere between 8 or 12 years, which is sort of the quite perfect window to drink a Hillside Shiraz. if you had, the choice?
I think even earlier than that, Michael. Like I would say, sort of from 5 to 10 years would be the sort of the peak time to have a Hillside. Yeah.
Well, I just want to add also, 2015, of course, Duncan joined us. Actually, it was December 2014, if I remember correctly. So in the scheme of things, I was very pleased to have him come in and join us. Duncan is very relaxed, calm, very much into detail. So that sort of told me, okay, it's very good in a base as, carrying the brand over the next few years, because of course Colin Kay sort of finished his winemaking, his actual winemaking, and then handed over to Duncan the reins, and it was very good. There's also common grounds we share. As you know, I'm German, and my accent gives that away. But Duncan actually has a German partner. I just have to be very careful when I, somehow do the wording or scream out loud, which I never do. So because he would understand it and he would be able to pick it. Anyway, I think the 2015 is a beautiful wine. It's his first vintage at Kay Brothers, and I have to say congratulations. That was a really fantastic start. The 15s remind me all of more tannins in structure. There's some other people in McLaren Valley who would even go to the extent in saying that the 2015 almost delivered Nebbiolo-like astringent tannins. I don't think it's quite as astringent as that, but still, there's a lot of life in a 2015. It's drinking well, but it can still go for some time. It's a lovely wine.
And wine number 6, the 2014 Hillside Shiraz. So this is the oldest wine in the lineup. 8 years have passed since its birth. And looking at the time it had to mature, it should be getting close to the perfect kind of drinking window. Common knowledge suggests that the tertiary notes have gained in this wine. And as wine ages, the primary flavours move into the background and other notes become more prominent. And those are called the tertiary notes. Little school lesson here. They tend to stray further from the fruit flavours and into the more complex kind of versions of earth, mineral, mushroom, nuts, floral, spice, all those gorgeous earthy things that remind me of, I guess, McLaren Vale and Autumn and Kaipo, which is nearby to here. How do you feel about this one, Duncan? Talk about the longer time on skins for this vintage.
Yeah, and I wasn't here for the vintage, but I did was in charge of putting the final blend together. And I think 14 was one of those years I always reflect to the vintage or the season, because that's what has the biggest impact. And it was a warm, dry summer, but then in February there was quite a lot of rain just before vintage, and that delayed things a little bit. And it allowed the vines to recover and from a hot summer, and it freshened them up a little bit and just gave the wine a bit more flesh. But it definitely spent a bit longer on skins. And when you do that, sometimes if you've got very tannic wines, you would think that the longer they're on skins, the more extraction you're going to get. But there's sort of it's like a logarithmic curve. So after sort of 10 days or more, sometimes that wine can actually soften a little bit with extra time on the skins, and that was the theory behind it. And the unique thing about the 2014 was that some of the wine was also aged in a big foudre, which is just in the middle cellar, which is not far from here, only about 15 metres from where we're sitting. And the theory behind that is just, again, to get complexity and perhaps a bit more freshness, because the barrel's much bigger. So it's quite a big barrel, holds 5,000 litres, and the other barrels, most of this wine's aged in hogsheads, which is 300 litres, and some of it in puncheons, which is 500. So the bigger format oak talks more about the freshness of the fruit, but then you're balancing that out with a bit longer time on skin, so we didn't stray too much from the Hillside style. But be interesting to see if people are noticing a difference in the tannins in that wine or not.
Do let us know. We've had a really great observation from Colin Black, who says 2015 has a lovely savoury note, even meaty perhaps. How do you manage the treatment of the wine with oak each vintage? Good question.
Yeah, so there's Michael often makes the comment that things at K Brothers are an evolution, not a revolution, and we try and keep a fairly consistent style, and it's the same with the oak handling. That's a big part of it, but we're always adapting to changes in sort of modern techniques or how consumers prefer their wine. So I did just mention it before, but there's about 30% of the Hillside that goes into new oak, and it's probably about 70% American oak and 30% French oak. Every year it depends on the volumes a little bit, so I can't give you the precise numbers, but I would say about 80% of the wine are in these 300 litre hogsheads, and 20% are in the puncheon, which is the 500. And we're finding that I think as we go forward, I think we'll probably start to use more puncheons because I just prefer the balance in that. Block 6, for example, is all done in puncheons. So, yeah, we try not to, the oak's an influence in the wine, but we try not for it to be a driving force. It's more about what we do out in the vineyard and try and reflect that as the feature. And then we just tweak the oak a little bit every year and try and get a harmonious product, if possible.
And what are the critics saying, Michael, about
wow.
2014?
They're all over it. In 2014, the Hillside Shiraz 2014, Ned Goodwin, Master of Wine, and obviously a wine writer for Wine Companion nowadays, he basically judges all the wines for McLaren Vale. Saw it up on release in 2016, so 2 years after we basically bottled it. And he said this is the sort of generous wine that wears its heart on its sleeve, oozing of carnal ripeness seldom found elsewhere. I repeat, seldom found elsewhere. It's all McLaren Vale. The oak, while heady, will be absorbed in time. And I think that's a good example. The oak really, or the treatment in the oak barrel has sort of now amalgamated. It's all become a more balanced wine. So they've got fruit, you've got the oak disappearing in the background, and then of course you've got sort of that tertiary notes coming up. And yeah, for me, it's a beautiful wine. Greg had a very interesting comment. He said it's really starting to show tertiary character, charcuterie, truffle, looking great. I love truffle, and I don't know about you, even so truffle season is over, but I'm going to have this wine for Christmas. Cheers, everyone.
Yeah, that's a good idea. There's something to be said about drinking a wine in the place that it was made, with views of the vineyards from which the grapes came as well. And I do encourage you, if you're in South Australia, or even if you're not, come to SA and come and drink the wines here, because whoever's cutting that grass out there deserves some kind of award. It is looking spectacular out there at the moment.
Well, I think we have gone through the tasting. It's really amazing to see 6 vintages, and I have to repeat myself, we don't have the opportunity very often to see and look at 6 vintages at the single time. And it's always amazing to see how they sort of perform and how they develop. And really, it makes you think of, yep, you should be putting some more in your cellar because they develop incredibly well. I know, of course, in Australia, not many houses have a lot of cellar space, and not many houses have cellars, but still I think it's worth putting some wines into the cellar because they develop. And you made a really good comment, which was almost like a sales and marketing comment, and I'm the sales and marketer here. Well, buy 6 and see how they go for a few years. And I think that's what you can do. We have got, of course, a very special pack. We've done it all for you. There's the Hillside Shiraz pack of the vertical offered today. I think it's about $300, which is really fantastic. And then we've got also the trio of the sort of more recent vintages, the 2017, 18 and 19, and they're all available. And I can tell you, it's very limited. The first one I talked about, the whole vertical, we've got only 24 six-packs. And then we've got 26 six-packs of the trio. And then we won't have a Hillside Shiraz back vintage tasting for a while because, well, we will be possibly sold out after that. Anyway, I just want to thank everyone for participating in the tasting, for buying the miniature packs, for getting on board with us. It's great to have also Katie involved to sort of comment on it. And I hope you all had a fantastic time. So thank you very much. And I want to especially thank our tech, Simon Lee. We should put a photo up. He's got 3 cameras set up. He's got special lighting. So it's pretty amazing what he does. And we're looking quite professional in this setup. So thank you again for joining us this evening, for your support. And we hope to see you all in McLaren Vale at our beautiful cellar door, well, in the next few months or years, because we've invested quite a bit of money, the Kay family has, to make it even more comfortable, more beautiful. We've got this beautiful deck overseeing the Mount Lofty ranges. We've got tasting flights. We've got beautiful, well, food as well. We do cured meats, cheeses from Woodside and others. And Alex Hardy, who runs the direct-to-consumer, is making sure that everyone really feels absolutely welcome and you can indulge. So thank you again, and thanks for everyone coming on board tonight. And just make sure that you grab one of those 6-packs because it's worth it.
Thank you.